And I'd love to drill down a little bit there because that's one, and you're right. Like a decade ago, gut issues was just starting to be talked about. And I know you, it sounds like you, even before then, were pioneering kind of some connections that people just weren't talking about, specifically in the mainstream. But even today, although it definitely is talked about in the larger zeitgeist, and it's why I want to drill down is because I literally had a friend last night text me, and I'm certainly no expert about them just having some like base gut issues, and they said, "Hey, could you connect me with anyone that could help with this?" And so the question for me is, even now where it is, it's much more like people understand like, hey, not only like probiotics, of course, and your gut health overall is affecting the way you think and feel, but what are some practical takeaways for individuals now that you would say, having been in that field for 20 years at this point, that the everyday person could implement that would allow them to both understand the connection better, but then also be able to apply some things that would make them feel better and think better.
That is a great question because it's what you're entreing to is not just the notion of fixing a problem, but really, how did you get into the mess in the first place? And our approach to handling the gut, as is anyone, not just for the brain, but anyone who's dealing with gut issues and their relationship to other things in the body, or just the relationship to the gut itself, involves what we call the 3R program: remove, replace, and repair. And so, as we look at remove, right off the bat, what are the things that we are doing that are threatening the diversity and the function of our billions of gut organisms? And let's say not just bacteria, but viruses and fungi as well. And I think, getting to the name of this podcast, for crying out loud, we are now living in a world that is very much at odds with our physiology. This whole notion of paleo, of trying to replicate what our earlier environment must have been like, and how did that allow us to survive, to allow us to be alive today. What are all those changes that took place over tens, hundreds, if not thousands of years to allow us to adapt to our environments? Now we challenge every aspect of our physiology. And getting back to your question, we sure as heck challenge the gut bacteria and the other organisms collectively with their metabolites called the microbiome by so many aspects of our modern world. So where do we begin? Well, I think the best place to begin is food. And I think, one of the simplest things to recognize is that your gut bacteria need fiber to be healthy and happy. If they're not healthy and happy, you're in deep trouble. You're in trouble from an immunological perspective and even a brain perspective. So the simple response is you've got to analyze your diet and make sure you're eating enough good fiber. And that means fruits and vegetables. I'm not saying go full on vegetarian, but that's one of my criticisms of being full on carnivore, is there's no fiber in any animal product. And I'm an omnivore. I eat my share of beef and fish and chicken, but I think most of what I think is best for us from the gut microbiome perspective has to do with what fuels them, and that is fiber. I think the second thing is, our very toxic environment threatens our gut bacteria. And when we threaten our gut bacteria, we threaten their ability to do good things. And one of the most important things that the gut bacteria do is they maintain the integrity of the gut lining. When that is threatened, we're in trouble. I'll get back to that in just a moment. Let's first talk about some of these threats. And, we can talk about toxins in the environment. And immediately you're thinking about, the 10,000 chemicals that we're exposed to that we've never been exposed to before, the PM 2.5 particles in the atmosphere that we breathe and ingest. That's certainly very relevant with respect to the recent fires out in California. But I think that more importantly, we should be thinking about everyday things that we expose ourselves to that we're not really classifying as being toxic, but nonetheless are really having an impact on our gut microbiome, like taking over-the-counter non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, or proton pump inhibiting acid blocking drugs. We see these advertised on television. Somebody's going to go eat a great big sausage sandwich, then their stomach's upset, and they'll pop a couple of Prevacid or something. No, don't eat the sandwich if it upsets your stomach. Don't eat the sandwich and cover it up by taking Prevacid, which does what? It reduces stomach acid aggressively, and that changes the pH environment of the entire digestive system. Now, recognize that the array, the diversity and function of the gut bacteria depend on their environment, and the pH of that environment is very critical in terms of determining which bacteria will live and which bacteria will not. So you're going to already shift the environment. We know that there's a significant, like 48% increased risk in long-term users of these proton pump inhibiting drugs. And also even larger increased risk, as much as 70% increased risk of stroke. Now, Alzheimer's and stroke are fundamentally inflammatory. How might that relate to changes in the gut bacteria? Well, again, it gets back to this notion that the gut bacteria are keeping the walls of the fortress intact. They're maintaining the gut integrity, the lining integrity. When that is breached because we've messed with the gut bacteria and their array, their diversity, their function, then bad things get from the garbage dump into the system and light up the immune system and turn on inflammation. And that is a central player in virtually every neurodegenerative condition that you don't want to get. So what I've just done is related some very common practices that we are told to pursue, like taking the darn PPI drug over the counter when we don't tolerate the sausage sandwich, and getting Alzheimer's. Now, that may seem like a stretch. Those are two seemingly very disparate dots to connect, but it's real. This is, wonderful peer-reviewed medicine, and we now understand these mechanisms, and it allows people like me to come on a podcast like yours and say, hey, this isn't a free ride, taking drugs like this, drinking chlorinated water, not getting enough restorative sleep, spending too much time sitting down and not moving around, keeping, being on a diet that's letting your blood sugar rise. All of these things threaten your gut microbiome, and our brain health vitally depends on the health of the billions of organisms living within us.